So a quick thank you to our sponsor, Careerist, before we dive into today's episode. Because not everyone wants to spend their time learning how to code to get that elusive career in tech. And with Careerist QA Bootcamp, you don't have to. In just 4 months, you can have live training, a remote internship, and a career coaching that sets you up for success. Because in a world of job layoffs, QA is one of the fastest growing fields in tech. And there are currently 37,000 openings in the US right now, and with salaries up to $105,000. And Careerist grads, they're working at companies in 42 states, and with a very highly respectable 4.7 star Trustpilot rating, I think it's clear the model seems to work. And remember, if you don't land a job within a year, you get your tuition fees back. So what's the catch? Well, the only catch really is that the seats for the next class won't last. So you'll find the link in the show notes. Check it out. Let me know how you get on. Maybe I can get you on the podcast when you get that career in tech and tell me about your journey. But now it's time to get straight into the discussion with my guest today. What does the future of digital product development really look like, especially when you strip away the hype? Well, to help me answer that, I'm going to be joined by Matt Strentz. He's a co-founder of Iversoft, and they are a company that has been shaping mobile-first and multi-platform solutions since the days of the original iPhone way back in 2007. And over the past 17 years, Matt and his team have gone from a boutique mobile studio to international digital innovation partner. And they're working across industries from healthcare to aviation to home building. And along the way, they've built a consulting model that's rooted in process, transparency, and human-centered design. But here's what makes this conversation a little bit different. Matt doesn't just look at technology. He talks about why businesses struggle, where they waste money, how they can build systems that last. And his process is pretty straightforward. Discovery, design, build, and support. No smoke. No mirrors, no buzzword bingo. We're just going to get into why mobile-first strategies continue to unlock user feedback and growth, and how quality assurance needs to begin on day one, and also why UX should never be treated as an afterthought. And he'll also share how AI fits into this massive puzzle, not as a shiny distraction, but as a tool for documentation, productivity, and genuine ROI. As regular listeners will know, that is one of the big things that I like to focus on. So we'll look at the digital transformation as a living, breathing process today rather than a one-off project, and explore everything from European firms feeling 10 years behind North America to airlines in the Arctic still running on clipboards. So how do you balance experimentation with long-term strategy and get your projects out of those dreaded pilot phases? And what can you do as leaders? Well, with that scene set, let me introduce you to Matt right now, who's waiting to join us on the podcast. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, so my name is Matt Strentz. I am the co-founder of a company out in Canada called Iversoft, and we basically work with companies and startups to build their digital technology for them. Digital tools, digital platforms. We're basically an IP building consultancy. So we work with a lot of companies that might be technical, but they're not technical in this fashion. And we sort of help them with their business goals. They come to us with all sorts of problems. It's like the Christmas list for Santa of problems. Like, we can't do this. We don't know how to talk to them. How do we do this? And we help them strategize, and we build custom software or custom software platforms to either help run their business more efficiently with higher productivity, or we help them communicate and understand their client base better than they are now. That's sort of the nutshell of everything.
Well, there's so much I want to talk with you about today. And as we look into the future a little bit, I'd love to discuss with you the future of digital product development and some of the things you're seeing. So if we look at today's landscape, why is it a mobile-first, multi-platform approach no longer just optional? And how does it influence that long-term product strategy? What are you seeing there?
Well, I think the reason that mobile first became quite large is we were actually, just to back up a half step, like we actually began Iversoft during iPhone 1. So we're, there's many companies in the Canada and the US who have I've described our background and they say, okay, you guys are mobile pioneers. And I said, well, okay, fine. That seems to be an ongoing thing. And I think the reason for that was very early on, both co-founders, myself and Vicky Iverson, noticed that if you have access to the internet, the same sort of web experiences, the same sort of application experiences, and it's always with you, you're going to get much more feedback. If we can think back to the days before Facebook was had a mobile application, the growth there was big. You had a lot of popularity, but it was very siloed. It was students who were on their computers all day, who were studying, doing notes, what have you. They had a laptop or a desktop in front of them. And as soon as we saw the first mobile application released for Facebook, their growth exploded. And it's just simply because it goes with you everywhere, in your pocket all the time. So it's always accessible. So that's sort of why today, after, we're in our 17th year, so 17 or 18 years of mobile, it's become ubiquitous. It's it's the best way to talk to your clients. It's the best way to talk to customers. It's the best way to learn, what your customers really want, their pain points. It just makes it so much easier to be in contact constantly. And marketing always gets rolled into that. And marketing has always how do we get your attention? You can go back, if I go and visit the Le Mans Museum, I can see automotive advertisements from 1920, 1913, whatever. They're all up on the wall and you're like, wow. And these were all on the side of buildings, right? So now they're kind of nostalgic, but that's, we've got technology now that allows that to go everywhere. And in yesteryear rather, you would have all of those things. Can we rent this guy's building so we can paint it on the side of a wall when they're walking by? Or is this sign going to be seen in the middle of a market on the weekend where the most amount of eyeballs are seeing it? Or if you're on a platform at the train station, how many people can see this in a day? This allows you to follow people everywhere they go and also to get user interaction back to the company itself. They can learn things this way. So it's not merely just marketing in its normal sense. It's actually, there's sort of a back and forth conversation, if you will. And this allows the client, the customer, to keep getting actually the more optimal product, because the companies that are, supplying these things are going to learn from you saying, oh, we had no idea that this was a pain point. Oh, we had no idea that people were using our platform in this way because we thought we were going to use it in the other. And so, this allows a lot of the companies that are providing these platforms to adapt to their client needs. And as such, it becomes what we say more sticky. So people are like, well, it's more useful. We need it all the time. It's ubiquitous.
You just say now, 17 years? And I think right now everyone's obsessing over AI and have been doing so for 3 years. And when it first came out, a lot of people were saying, oh, this is just like the iPhone moment. And I kind of said, it is, but it feels more like the App Store moment that followed a couple of years later, because to begin with, we're just seeing all these crazy concepts that don't really solve a problem. When mobile apps first came out, it was about turning your phone into a pint of beer or a chainsaw or something. It wasn't until developers had time to create something valuable and understand how they can solve real world problems. As a result, right now, we're seeing a lot of companies that focus on just AI, the tech first and problem later. They're stuck in pilot phase, wondering how they're going to get ROI from their product. And one of the reasons I mentioned that is one of the things that attracted me to you was your process-driven and transparent approach to consulting. And you have this discovery, design, build, and support framework. So can you tell me a bit more about that and how it helps set realistic expectations and maintain accountability with clients right from the offset? 'Cause I think this is something that's missing right now.
It is, yeah. I think it's one of the biggest differentiators from our company. And to me, it's a total surprise. My background is actually in tool and die making and mechanical engineering in the automotive space before I started Iversoft. So I came from a person who was 19 years old. I began learning very vigorous engineering process, both in the tool rooms when I was an apprentice, learning to machine, why we have processes, how this saves, and it kind of teaches you finance as well. Even though they're not trying to teach you finance, it's like, well, if you do it in this order, you're going to waste this much money the company doesn't have. And then when I moved into the design studio after becoming an engineer, going back to school again for engineering, it was like, we have these processes for very real reasons. And all of it is predicated on all the mistakes we made before. When mobile began, it was literally the Wild West. And a lot of companies that never had the advantage of having that prior experience, you have a lot of young people, especially with the computer science, they never had that structure. They were given like, I can figure out how to code. I can do all these amazing things in my head. That's great. But there's no ability to scale that out if you're not thinking about a process. And because there's just simply ignorance from a lot of those different companies, those processes didn't ever evolve. I mean, some of our competitors I can tell you about, they would have some of their lead developers also as their project manager. And like us, we're just giant X through that. It's like, no. Both of those jobs are full-time jobs. You only have time to do one. You cannot do things this way. You cannot, and as such, you would see that lead times would seriously lag. The costs would always go up. I mean, it got to the point, even if you look at a huge company like EA Games was spending so much money internally, they had to start outsourcing some of their development because the costs were just and it's because of that lack of process. So if anything I can lay claim to is that I always had a very large desire for us to be both transparent for the client, because our basically reputation is built on the relationships that we build with all our clients. That generally we have long-term relationships where they can call us at any time and say, Matt, Becky, Graham, whoever, like, I'm having trouble with this now. The other stuff's working great, but this new problem popped out. Do you have any ideas on how you could help us? What? Oh, sure. Absolutely. Let's sit down and have a chat about it. And the process is to keep people on time and on budget. Like, as our company needs to grow, we can't have a project sitting in the studio for hours and days and months on end, right? We need to get to the next one because we've got so many other clients that we need to help. So for our own sake, it was like very critical, like, okay, how do we go from A to B? And how do we make sure the client can come along for that ride, that we can check in with the client once, twice, three, as many times as they want, because we basically have a very strict rule that we are completely transparent with everyone we work with. And they can talk to any one of the developers. They can talk to the lead developer. They can talk to the project manager whenever they feel. And how do we make sure that we can get them to understand, here's our progress this week. Here's our progress next week. Here's where we're having trouble with your old development, like your old technology stack, where we're working on fixing this. And basically through honesty and transparency, suddenly you're never at odds with the client. They're like, oh, okay, now I understand. Okay. So like and the more that we get, the more we improve or mature these kind of processes, the easier it is for us to speak to the clients. We understand where typically their pain points are, where they might not understand computer science, or how we can put it in terms in which the client can understand. And as such, we have great relationships with our client. So that we feel it's really important. And a lot of that was just based on my upbringing, our COO's upbringing. She was one of the key people who built this along with the other co-founder, and just basically how we run our studio. And when I'm looking at it from a business sense, and you're looking at all the competitors and you're like, this is 6s and 7s. Like, I don't know how this shop gets new jobs. These guys are all over the road. So we didn't want to be like that. We've always wanted to be, and we also had a desire, like, we want more and more interesting and complex projects, because basically the people we have on staff, they don't want to get bored with a project for 5 years where it's just like, oh, this is a database, but it's for Apple, like still a database where I'm like watching paint dry here. They want to be challenged. They want to like extend their skills. And of course, we always want, as a company, want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. We want to keep up with the new trends. We want to make sure that we can provide these new advantages to the people we work with. And we also want to make sure we understand them very well. So coming around again to the AI question you asked, I would say, yes, this AI or machine learning is new. It's not sentient yet. So it's, as a nerd, we always say machine learning internally. But anyway, it's still, just like you mentioned, it's still in its infancy, and people really don't know how to use it. Like currently right now, people are using these AI tools exactly like you would Google. You're asking like, what should I do? Instead of, how can we write prompts that could be several pages long with layered instructions? How are we able to like utilize this in the best way? And what parts of the process can we use within the platforms we build to augment that? So in some cases, like, we can use an AI tool to help with documentation. Documentation on software, especially custom software, is horrendous in general in the industry. Yeah. We pride ourselves on having extremely good documentation. The other co-founder, Vicky Iverson, is a savant at it. She has always been this way. She has always had super organized code. It's just a natural ability of hers. And we've sort of pushed that across the entire culture of the company. But as such, one of the hardest things for a company to do is their documentation. They'll have developers who are like, I know what I did. I don't have to write. Well, no, you do. Because if a bus hits you tomorrow, someone else has to figure out where are the notes. And often there's a company in Spain right now we're working with. They don't have any documentation, and this software is like 20 years old. So it looks like, I get visions in my head of like the Griswold family Christmas when we untie the Christmas tree knot with the lights, and it's just like a basketball full of and we come by that far more often than you would think. So it was just like, in these instances, these are where these AI tools can really help keep you organized, keep maintenance costs down, and keep your uptime moving. And in fact, this past week, internally, our company has had an AI hackathon. So everybody split into groups, including like the business and non-development sides of the company, the admin, everybody else. They all came up with ideas, documentation, things that they could use or we could build internally that would help bolster our productivity and our efficiency. So we've kind of just adopted this full hog and said, okay, we want to be experts at using these tools, right? And right now I think of most people, it's like someone's given them a fresh, new, shiny Swiss Army knife with all these tools and like, cool. And right now everybody's showing their friend, hey, look what I got for Christmas. That's just fantastic. And they're like, what's this for? Like, I don't know. Like, you keep opening everything up. You're like, I don't know what this one's for. So and we want to make sure we can just flip it open, use it whenever we need to, and say, okay, this is the best way to use this tool. This is what, because there's so many choices. There's north of 60 different tools that I'm aware of right now that we've been doing research on for the last 3 or 4 months just in my office. So that's not even company wide. That's just the office that I kind of run and manage. So it's been like an eye-opening experience because you have like new tools coming on all the time. And right now it sort of feels like fashion. Oh, everyone's got to have these shoes or everyone's got to have these jeans right now. And it feels sort of that kind of thing. It's very buzzwordy. And a lot of it comes from the business side that truly does not have the background information yet. So like we just pride ourselves in saying we want to have this information so that we can consult and teach all of our clients on the business end really how to best use these tools and get rid of all the sort of hoopla.
And another area I know you're passionate about is around human-centered design and user experience. And I think many companies still treat UX and UI as just the finishing touch, whereas usability and accessibility should be built right into the foundation. So tell me more about that and also the kind of business impact that you've seen from doing it this way, from the foundation.
Like I can give you so many examples, and this isn't the only, this has been talked about for a few years now. And I've actually been really hoping that there's been more and more conversation about it. I remember watching, I forget the podcast now, but it was down in California in the Silicon Valley area. And it was basically 45 minutes long talking about the absolute horrible UI UX design of Facebook right. And so you think about it, think of the number of people who utilize Facebook every single day on mobile. And yet all the people who have now like had a second glance back and said, okay, let's have a look at like the design of this thing. They're like, this thing's terrible. Like who designed these areas? Like who knew where these menus are? It's totally not intuitive. It takes there's tutorials on YouTube. So if you're like, I don't know how do I use Marketplace? Oh, okay. I'll go look on YouTube. And then they have to have tutorials. So if you put yourself in that position, I'd say you've kind of failed at the UI UX game. So our approach has always been, who's going to use it? What is, what kind of technical ability would these people have? Like if we're building an application for like a construction firm, these people don't use computers every day. They use your phones every day, but it needs to be very intuitive and deliberate in saying, okay, this is here, this is there. And like the whole idea is to have smooth use, is to have the user have a good relationship with it. Like they'll want to use it. Like how many times have you been sitting at a dinner party and someone's looking for something on their phone? Like, forget it. Like they just get frustrated. Like, I'll look for it later. Right. And it happens to me all the time too. I'll be looking for a photo or a document that we're having this amazing conversation and this thing would augment. And I'm like, oh, Google, what have you done? And every time my phone updates, Android changes the way they've organized. They constantly change the UI UX too. So not only is it bad design, but the implementation and the updating of it too. It's like you have to keep relearning bad UI UX all the time just to stay above. You want to get rid of that. It takes time. So time takes away productivity and efficiency. Frustration and stress is not what you're trying to impart into a user. You're trying to do the opposite thing, right? That's not the goal. And the other thing too is you want people to repeat use it. Like you want it to become a tool that you just can't do without. So if you're looking at it, if you're not paying attention to the UX UI and you're only paying attention to like the function of the app, which happens a lot. And that's what dev teams do. They're like, well, it works great. And they're like, nobody else knows how to use this but you. Like, if I watch you walk through this thing, you're open this, close that, go through here, go through. That's not like, we want smooth flow. And basically the other, like, because we love working with, medium and large companies just as much as we like working with startups and small ones, you need, like, if you have millions of users, you've got to have a smooth transition through the application so people can find something. Like we've done applications for insurance companies. Can you imagine if we didn't take a human-centered approach to UI on that? Like how many forms, you wouldn't get any adoption to it. So it's just, we try and always use the best industry practices because we're trying to actually make everybody's life easier. That's like, we really like automating these things. We like using things to save people time, to save them money, and to get more out of, whatever their goal is. It's either communicating with their clients, running their businesses more efficiently, meeting revenue goals. We help them compete against other businesses. So like you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're not thinking about, okay, we need to make this like simple, elegant, and easy to use. That's kind of the mantra. And if we can at least keep that in mind, even if it's a complex app, we're miles down the road in making people say, okay, this is great. This is fantastic. I can use this. I can just use my thumb. I can see where this goes. I remember where this page is. It really just comes down to like taking the human who doesn't work in computer science into account and saying, okay, this is how they're going to use it. This is their understanding of it, and just sort of helping them along.
And another challenge for business leaders right now is preparing for and adopting emerging technologies. And again, can be so difficult when there is so much hype around AR, VR, and AI, and cloud native systems, private AI. There's so much going on there. So how do you advise clients to balance experimentation with that long-term ROI and strategy to ensure that they're not just another project caught in pilot phase?
Exactly. So we basically try and gain all the requirements first. So when I start talking and meeting with companies, I'm sort of the very pointiest end of the spear because I'll be the front, but we actually have teams now that come behind me and can really accentuate everything. But I sit down and say, don't tell me any technology you want to use. Describe for me in detail what your problems, your pain points, or your goals are. Okay. And then we can start talking about what implementations you've tried to have started or done and what languages those in. And then we can build a roadmap and say, okay, let's triage this. Let's do a pairwise comparison. What is the most important thing to fix now? And in that case, instead of getting, what fighter pilots called helmet flash, we can like take all of this down a few notches and say, okay, let's do this. And we can do this in parallel. And then we can do it. And we can sort of just consult with them and help them and say, okay, let's build a roadmap. Let's get something so you're successful. Success is the end goal of all of our projects. So if you're going to look at all of these things, 1, what are you using for them? 2, what is your understanding of their use? And B, what is your actual business goals? Forget the technology. What would you like to do? Just tell me, right? And if we take that sort of general approach, we can get amazing amounts of ideas and things out of the clients we work with. We can document them all down. We can run a workshop with them. And then from that workshop, give them a report and say, okay, this is kind of what you told us. This is what we've got. Here are recommendations. What do you guys think? Like, is this from our understanding, this is the most important. And that's, again, when you build a relationship with them, they'll look at them like, oh, this is fantastic. The most recently I did it with a small airline in Canada that flies up in the Arctic. And we sat down, we did a whole consulting report with them. I was the only one on board for this one. I worked with their own internal consultant, and we just went back and forth. And the consultant I worked with, she had been running around that place for months because there was so many fires to put out, and there's so many things, everything from paperwork to Transport Canada needed everything to be digitized. They were still using clipboards. We just kind of worked around it all. And together we just sort of figured out, okay, what is the most important thing to do right now? And for them, it was like, we need a mobile app so that we can do digital ticketing. We can do sign-ins and everything else that we can't do. And it's a technical need for sure, but our customers are really demanding this. They're like, you're the only airline we fly with that we can't do a digital ticket system with. So it's sort of things like that. And if we just step it back, right, and just take a deep breath and say, okay, let's build a roadmap. That is sort of, exactly what you said. Like, we don't want to start all these projects at once. We want to make sure that each one of them becomes successful. They don't get stuck and they don't waste budget, because you've got to have like some ROI, right? That's part of the whole mantra too. So, and that's the work I enjoy. I've got a very deep technical background, and over the 17 years I've worked here, I've really been, I've been a student of the business side, administration, business, all of those things too. So now I've got like this duality that I can step in and say, okay, the technical side of me knows exactly what your problem is. Here's the analytical side of me going, this is how I think the best way we can sort it out. Let's work together and figure that out. And usually the clients are just like over the moon. We've taken over code bases from multiple companies. Some of them, one of the ones we have right now that's been in our shop for 3 years, they had their own internal dev team. And by the end of it, they're like, we're just going to use you guys now. So right. And it's that process. It's the human-centered UI UX design. And it's like the triaging, the road mapping with them and working with them. And these are technical people too. So they like one of the co-founders there was actually a developer and built their first stack that we're rebuilding. So even he's like in awe going, whoa, you guys are organized. And I'm like, well, it just makes lighter work. So it's work. And that's the goal. That's the most, that's the thing I love the most.
And one of the other things that put you on my radar is just how you're scaling across multiple industries, because you work across sectors from healthcare to sports. So I've got to ask, what lessons have you learned when adapting different technologies and consulting practices for such different industries? It must be quite a challenge.
Initially, they can become a challenge because most of the challenge for us is learning how that industry works. Yeah. And as the saying goes, the more they change, the more they stay the same. So there's so much overlap between a lot of the different technology groups and a lot of the industries. They might use different languages, but they're using the same process. Like we can have, if we're working with a food processing plant, right, and a manufacturer, one's making things out of metal, the other one's, making things out of beef. And even though people would say, well, these are miles apart, I'll look at them like, no, they're almost the exact same. It's just like the medium changes, they've got to get this part over here to this truck over there. And just with the food processor, it starts over here and they need to get the finished product onto the truck. Like, there's so many similarities between them. I think it really helps us jump between. So, I mean, we've done a lot of education in healthcare as well. We've done a lot of health tech and and that goes way back before they were sort of buzzy and new. And it was just like as 17 years go by and like, we're going to keep going, there's a lot of narrowing of the interchangeability between the industry. So the initial challenge is always like, okay, we need to study the industry. How does the industry operate? What are the differences that we don't know? And sort of once we do that, the study, the quiz and the test are almost identical to a whole bunch of other ones. Right. And the other thing that we really like working in a lot of different industries is for innovation. So when you start working, we can take ideas that we worked with an insurance company and use them for a health tech or an education app. You're like, oh, we could use that over there and this. And that's sort of what helps keep us very sharp and skillful, our expertise up. Cause that's the other big thing that I'm always pushing on. And so is our CEO and the other co-founder. Like we've got to make sure we've got the best expertise that we can help the clients with the most efficient people, right? Someone who'll know exactly what's going on. So for us, it's sort of a joy because it's like you always get to do something, like I said, something new, interesting, new challenge, which keeps everybody motivated. Like, hey, this is really cool and fun. And then at the same time, it's like, this is really helping with our ability to innovate. So it's like years ago, the best example is we used to work we haven't in a while, but we were working previously in home building. So we would help a few of the home builders create touch panel tablets, which were like, TV sized tablets. And the companies that we were working with, we started studying the industry standard, like who else provides this technology. And there was one company out of Toronto and they had literally stagnated for like 10 years. They just kept repeating that there was nothing new to offer. There was no new features. They were running their entire software off Mac minis. So you had to, even though you could use these tiny little Android computers, they were putting like full desktop computers at this setup. And they had just stagnated because they found something that had worked in the first 18 months of their business. And they just sort of, dished it out like cafeteria food, but what it was lacking was differentiation. So if you're working with different home builders, they don't want to see the exact same application used, because what differentiates them, what makes the experience better when you're buying a home with them versus the other? Well, it becomes all the same again. So by using different things like this, where you allow, in our case, the buyer to come in and make changes on their own to floor plans or the features of the materials, and saying, oh, wow, not only do they get to be involved in their home building, which is what at the time was very innovative, but it also distinctly shortens the sales cycle for the salespeople, which is what they want. They don't want to spend, usually spend 4 or 5 hours with the homeowner, the new homeowner, saying, okay, which kind of flooring do you want? Which kind of cabinets do you want in your kitchen? All of those things, right? Well, we allowed the customer to go through that on a touchscreen on the wall. So and at that time it was massively innovative, right? And the cool thing was, when we were testing, I think I was installing, I did all the installs for that, by the way. I had to go myself and mount all of these things on the wall. And I was in one of the showrooms for this company. They had 8 at the time around Southern Ontario. And we had a young girl came in, and she was going to buy her very first house. So she was in her late 20s, and she just came up to the tablet like it was a phone, kind of got it. And then maybe a half hour later, when I was just finishing putting the last panel on the wall, there was a retired couple who were coming in to buy a smaller bungalow house as their downsized house. And they just used it exactly like, the young girl had done. So it was ubiquitous. It was that whole human-centered approach. And I just looked at the guy who was working with me. I'm like, okay, we did it. It works. We didn't, there's no it doesn't matter what age demo. It was just intuitive enough that they could, oh boy. And then you could see people having fun with it. They'd be like, oh, what about this elevation or this? And I really enjoyed that project, because you could really see all these different demographics coming together, and they loved being sort of in the driver's seat of saying, I'd like to have this, or I'd like to change that, or like, what happens if we change this? Oh, there's another window there. So the self-discovery sort of, and it helps build brand awareness, right? It's like, okay, well, this builder is allowing you to make all these changes on your own, and it really feels more like a custom experience rather than like this one, or this one, right? Which was sort of what you get. So, that's kind of the best example, I think, to sort of answer your question in that way.
And from my research, I also learned that you always, you see quality assurance as a strategic advantage. So on that side of things, why should QA and user acceptance testing? Tell me about more why you think that should begin on day one, and also how that approach might reduce risk compared to the traditional launch-focused testing.
Yeah, for the first few years of Iversoft, for sure, that department didn't exist. It didn't exist for anyone. You would do your own sort of team testing before you kind of gave it out to the client. But as we started building larger and larger platforms, we knew that you've got to have you're working with Fortune 1000s, Fortune 500s, in some cases, Fortune 100s for us. So it's not working is going to really hurt our own reputation. So for our own good, because we wanted to show our expertise, you may have built a fantastic app, but if there's one little bug that just out of hundreds of thousands of lines of code that just sort of hiccups on that wrong moment, you're sunk, right? And it also, even if clients come back to you and say, well, why is this, within the billing cycle? It's this is so that when we give it to you, it's bomb proof. It's ready for your customers. It's ready for everything. There's no second guessing. Right. And it's critical for us to find these things out during our sprint runs to make sure that, we minimize those and that the software works exactly how you intended it. We don't want your user base or your client base to see any of these bugs they'll fix it next week. We don't do that. Every time the goal is to have your uptime maximized, right? We do maintenance cycles. Everything is, subject to maintenance cycles. But in our case, you always want to help the company that you're working with put their best foot forward. And to do that, to help build their own reputation, whatever tools they're giving to their client base or the public to use, you want them to work exactly as intended. So it's definitely a strategic thing. It pays dividends back. I could name, without even trying, in my head, 15 companies right now. And I'm just doing it in my head and these are huge companies. These are internationally huge brands. Europe, UK, Canada, US, they are all sold in these areas, and they've built suites of apps, and I'm all of them have they don't even function, some of them, or they crash, or they right. And these are huge companies. And now what kind of reputation hit are you going to take if all your clients are well, I like buying their product, but the app that goes with it doesn't work? How many times does this happen? And then what else are you losing in that? You're losing you're using your reputation, you're losing abilities to gain new information from your client base, which would help improve the product or service that you've already got. I mean, it's a risk mitigation, but I think it's just good business. It's like making sure like you always have to be there for that client. They can't do without you. Like that is the whole thing that you're always trying to get to. And by having good quality assurance, that just makes that task or goal that much easier. So it's something that we always function with. And we tell all of our clients, this part of it's not negotiable. We don't negotiate on project management and we don't negotiate on quality assurance, quality QC. We always have to make sure that we have quality assurance, quality control, and the project manager to make sure your project goes smoothly to market. Because, these big projects like that we're working on in big companies, they have deadlines. And if we don't have these things, those deadlines don't get met. And that's really the goal we're trying to meet. We're trying to work with the client. We're more of an extension of their company. Like their goals become our goals. So it's like the only way to meet those goals, you've got to be precise. It's like same as the military, right? There's a reason they have all the rules and all their orders. Like, okay, we need to be here at this time. We all use precise watches, right? And that's the reason.
Looking at your story, you have evolved from a boutique mobile studio into an international digital innovation partner. So what role have leadership and culture played in that journey? And how are you also preparing the company for the next wave of digital transformation? Because the speed of technological change is moving faster than ever, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It's like, I think the reason that we've become a company that does this or behaves in this way was partly aspirational, because we all knew we want to work on really interesting projects. That was the selfish part of it. And then second, well, if we want to do that, then that means we have to be serving our clients in the absolute best way possible. So it's like, we have to take these into account. And the other thing too is because our industry itself, us as a company, it changes faster than babies change diapers. So if you're not organizing yourself in this way, you're going to stagnate, or you're going to start using technologies that fall out of fashion. And unfortunately, we've seen over the last 10 years that you've seen a lot of different coding languages, processes, and everything else fall by the wayside. And it's almost like, I call it H&M fashion. Maybe that's probably not a technical term we should use, but like, stuff comes into style and it goes out again. Like there's a few different languages that were absolutely just market dominating for about 3 or 4 years. And then something else came to replace it. So it's like, you've got to make sure that you put yourself in a position to give yourself a chance to make sure that you can keep your head above water and keep at the front end of that wave so that you're serving your clients the best way. So, and then like, for digital transformation now, I think the growth that we've seen, what's shocking, like as I'm sitting here today in Europe, it's the number of clients I've met with from like Holland, Germany, France, and Spain. They're all saying like, we are massively behind the US and Canada now. In some cases, the French tell me they think they're between 10 and 15 years behind. And it's like, now we're having trouble operating. So that's like, I have a new French client here, and they own a huge automotive business. It's multifaceted automotive business. And they're saying like, we don't have these automated things. Can you help us with all these things for both our clients and for our internal processes? And I'm like, absolutely. And I'm thinking in my head, like, Jesus, this is like what they're asking for was sort of, 8 or 10 years behind what we're doing now, and they're not doing it. So how are they going to compete? How are they going to compete against the rest of the marketplace that does this? And I guess the companies that I'm working with right now, they're taking the smart approach, going, we want to be first in this continent, in this marketplace to like actually utilize these tools so that we become, the ubiquitous, the best, the largest sort of competitor, because we're the most organized. And to run so it's funny. It's almost like thinking of a wave, like things sort of started off in California, came across the US and Canada like years ago. And now that wave has finally hit the shores of like Europe. I was down in the Caribbean having meetings with another technology company from Holland, from Amsterdam. And we had a long discussion over lunch about like AI tools. And he was saying, I've got so many people asking me to write AI tools that we don't have the staff to do it. And my question back to him, I'm like, do they know what they're asking for though? And he just sort of stopped and laughed. And he's like, sometimes yes, mostly no. Right. It becomes that buzzword. So now I think the maturity is sort of coming along with it. And at least even non-technical executives know, like, these are force multipliers if they're used in the right way. So I think like the attitudes in the general market have changed towards digital transformation, and us being like very well versed and very mature in that area and always pushing the envelope in terms of what we can do and like new technologies. I think that just helps us get ready, and the clients we work with get ready for the ever evolving, changing within digital transformation. It almost has to be, you can't be thought of as just a one-off project now. It's got to be thought of sort of like a living, breathing child within the company. It needs new clothes. It needs new shoes. It needs new, we need to get a new backpack. And it's just, you work that into your maintenance cycles, but at the same time, you've got a huge ROI that's providing with you. So, at the end of the day, you're far ahead with using it rather than not using it at all.
And I think that is a powerful moment to end on. So much of your words will resonate with people listening around the world today. And for those people listening, wanting to find out a little bit more information about the work you're doing, how you might be able to help, etc., where would you like to point everyone?
Just iversoft.ca. You can look for any one of us there, talk to anyone. My contact is quite easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn. Anytime. I would be happy to sit down and have a chat with you and find out if there's anything we can do to help. And if we have other channels, well, like I think we're on Instagram, Facebook, all of those areas. But I would mostly point people to the website and to LinkedIn.
Well, I'll have links to everything. I think talking today around the future of digital product development, process-driven and transparent consulting, human-centered design, user experience, and preparing for emerging technologies and the next wave of digital transformation. These are things that are impacting every business, regardless of their industry right now. And I'd love for people to get in touch with you, see how you might be able to help there. But just thank you for bringing it all to life today in a language that everyone can understand. Really appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate yours. Thanks for having me on.
So what's the lesson for anyone leading digital initiatives today, do you think? I think listening to Matt, it felt like it's quite clear that success isn't about chasing the next technology trend. It's actually about process, people, and purpose. And I think he offered a timely reminder that mobile-first strategies, they remain the backbone of user engagement. But quality assurance should be built in that from day one. And that human-centered design also, I think, is not a luxury. It should be the foundation of this adoption. And I also found his perspective on AI quite refreshing too. Treat it like a Swiss Army knife, but only open the tools that actually solve the problem that you're aiming at. And another thing that stood out for me was the way that Matt framed digital transformation as ongoing, almost like raising a child. It needs new shoes, new direction, and constant attention. And companies that see it as a one-time project, I think they're the ones that are going to fall behind. You can't just complete the project, throw it over the line, and expect to walk away into the sunset or move on to the next thing. And I think it's those that commit to continuous adaptation. They're the ones that will unlock the real ROI, the competitive advantage that they're ironically seeking. And of course, his consulting mantra, be transparent, stay accountable, and build long-term relationships, feels especially relevant, doesn't it, in a time where so many projects stall in endless pilot phases. So here's my one big takeaway. Before chasing buzzwords, sit down, write down those pain points and goals. Then ask if your technology roadmap actually supports them. Because whether you're running a startup, a global brand, or even an airline still working off clipboards, the future belongs to businesses that think strategically about design, quality, and trust. So, how will you make sure your next digital project isn't just functional, but truly indispensable? Lots to think about there. Let me know, as always, techblogwriter@outlook.com, techtalksnetwork.com as well. You'll find 8 different podcasts there, so please check those out. And I'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks for listening, everyone. Speak to you soon.